Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, we are excited to welcome my friend, Peter Lorenco, to the podcast. Pete has 14 years of experience accelerating marketing-driven pipeline and revenue for companies like EMC, Iron Mountain, Avid Technology, and most recently worked with me at Haiku. One of Pete's passions as a marketer is experimentation in the strategies and channels used to create, capture, and nurture demand, which is why I absolutely loved having him on the team. We're excited to learn more about Pete today and what he has done to expose his career and develop his career around relationships with CMOs, executive coaching, building a community of people that he admires and trusts and follows to learn from. I think a lot of our listeners can learn from that today. So welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share this channel with you also.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me, obviously you and I know each other, we work together, but so we'll get to that part of the story, but tell a little bit about your career path. Like, where'd you come from? How did you get here? Where are you at now? What drove your big pivots through your career?
So I would start by saying I'm naturally introverted, which I think we've debated this before in our past conversations. But so naturally, I'm definitely more of the introverted type. So my career actually started off in marketing ops for EMC, or what is a really large IT infrastructure company. And I did that for a couple of years. And then ironically, through like eloquent user groups and some of that lovely networking community that happens through some of that MarTech technology, I had a former boss who probably was my first mentor and advisor, and sort of saw the value of community through him. And he advised that I move into demand gen to really get closer to revenue, which at the moment I was like, or that time in my career, I was like, what does that mean? And then there was a lot of imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Like, do I really want to do that? Am I really right for it? And I took a leap, truthfully. Like, he offered me opportunity to step into demand gen. And my career has pretty much taken off since then. And truthfully, I've always credited getting closer to revenue, getting closer to sales. But leaning on the marketing ops of that is what's enabled me to grow my career. And I think the thing I would start off by saying or echoing is I've never waited for someone to help define my career. So once he sort of coached and advised me to get closer to revenue and pursue roles that would allow me to achieve that, that's really when I saw my career start to accelerate. And since then, I've always, even like Haiku, Kelly, with you and I've always tried to pursue roles that either challenge me in new ways or offer me opportunity to go into a different industry or get different perspectives, rather than like waiting for something that come into my lap. So that's really what I would credit in large part to where I am today, which is leading marketing for PathFactory, which is a MarTech company. It's my second head of marketing leadership, full marketing department role outside of Alice, where I worked prior to working with you, Haiku. And I'm excited to be marketing to marketers again. It's fun. So
yeah, it's the most fun. It's my favorite part of this job too. So being a Demandbase, also a MarTech company and a partner of PathFactories, definitely there's nothing more fun than marketing to ourselves and knowing exactly what works and what doesn't and what would resonate, what email I would respond to and what roadmap feature I would care about. It's great.
It's a lot easier.
It is.
Easier.
Yeah. But I love some of the themes you talked about. So I'm going to dig in on a couple of them. So the MOPS background, as we think about career paths, I think is one of those that it turns marketing into a science instead of an art. And I think often people think of marketing as sort of the artistic side, the fun, the brand and the creativity and the pretty pictures and all that good stuff. But really the heartbeat of marketing is really in the data. It's really in the ops side. So tell me about what did that transition look like from MOPS to revenue? Because all connected by data.
Yeah, honestly, it was a lot easier than I thought. So the ironic part when you're in a support role like marketing ops, which I don't like calling a support role, but that's kind of how it's always been perceived, is you are really the backbone of executing demand strategies. So whether that's helping execute email campaigns, building actual emails, managing a contact database in whatever automation platform or email platform you're using, helping do all the campaign setup, campaign tracking. In some cases, it's even building landing pages. Like in my first role I was actually responsible for overseeing all of our AdWord campaigns as well, which is sort of an early introduction to demand gen responsibility without realizing it fully. So truthfully, for me, it was more of a natural synergy than expected. But because of imposter syndrome and like that self-doubt, which Kelly, we've talked about, like, I've always had that challenge. It was sort of like the two forces. So there was one force that says, oh, you can't do this, stay in your wheelhouse, do what you're comfortable with, and you like being kind of like behind the scenes and comfort. And the other side, which was like, no, get in front of this, get in front of sales, pursue opportunities to like really be in charge or dictate strategy or direction, as opposed to like being told what to do and then just doing it and supporting it. So truthfully, it was more of a natural synergy than expected. And I would say that I agree with you. To me, ops is the backbone. If you don't understand what's working or what's not working, if you're not able to assess what are the key data points, and it's not 100, and Kelly, we did this at Haiku. It's like pick a few that ultimately matter to you and just get iron focused on those few things. And I think the other big thing is it's optimizing tech stack. Too often, we get these very bloated tech stacks. You use like 5% of it or 10% of it. And then, you get fun conversations with CFOs or finance departments where like, hey, why do you keep buying tech and you're not even using what you have, kind of thing. And I think that's something I've always been passionate about too, is how do we get more out of the stuff we have, or how do we experiment and try new things, as opposed to, hey, Kelly, like, you're my boss. Can I go and buy 5 new things? Like, and you remember, I would never just advocate going and getting new things. It was, how do we optimize what we got first? So those are some of the things I'm grateful for with a MOPS background. But I will say there's people way more sophisticated or stronger in MOPS than I will ever be. But having that background, having that mindset definitely allows me to be a stronger marketing leader and demand leader. Plus, I can look at things and I don't really need like 20 people to pull data.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love that. I think there's a lot in that. And I totally agree. Yeah, MOPS is definitely the backbone. I mean, it covers everything from the analytics and insights and measurement, but also the campaign operations. And as you said, building landing pages and connecting the back end of webinars and the MarTech stack. Yeah, I think my feelings on MarTech stack is, we talk about a lot at Demandbase, is people first, get our people sorted, and then build a process around that. And then tech then becomes the facilitator of that. I think a lot of times it's throw tech at it and that'll magically solve the problem. If we just put a tool in place, it'll fix it, instead of recognizing that the actual operations and culture of the company has to change to match that tech stack before you can bring it in. Sort of last step. Well, cool. Okay. So you have mentioned it twice now. So I want to talk about imposter syndrome. So first of all, I think people generally know what it is. I've witnessed it all throughout my career, either, moments in my own career or people I've worked with, or different in men versus women, often different in marketing versus sellers. I mean, I think it varies across the board, but at its core, tell me what you think about imposter syndrome, what it means and how it's affected your career decisions.
Yeah. So for me, and Kelly, you know this about me. So like, I even have a mental health professional that I use. And the way I describe it, even to that individual, is it's like the inner voice that has always been there that causes me to question almost any decision in my life, even when it's unnecessary. So what I mean by that is, even when I took the role at PathFactory, so what was that, 2 months ago, roughly 2 months ago, those few days prior to starting that new role, it was all the self-doubt of like, am I capable of doing this job? I don't have someone like Kelly, who was my former boss, who's like helping own marketing strategy and direction. And I was a piece of that bigger pie, right? What happens if this doesn't work out? What could go wrong? It was all those like what if scenarios is probably the best way to describe it. It's like, what if? And the ironic part about that is it sort of sabotages positive mindset. And when you start to sabotage your positive mindset and you allow negativity to kind of creep in, it can sort of tank everything for you, both professionally and personally. So for me, it's something I've had to work hard at for years. And even in our one-on-ones, some of our meetings, we talk about this very topic. And it's something now I'm grateful for understanding that that's something I have to just be mindful of. Even in like one-on-ones or with team members, at times, because I'm just so direct and open, which you know that about me, I will be vulnerable and I'll just be very open, but I have to remind myself to like pull back. Not everyone responds the same way, or just because I might see traits in others that reminds me of like that same thing doesn't mean that they're struggling or that's an issue for them. So truthfully, and I think we'll talk about this, but I have a coach that I've worked with professionally that I'll bring scenarios to instead, or just to help like work through things and not allow some of my vulnerabilities to sort of sabotage how I conduct myself or meetings or difficult work situations. And then personally, same thing. Like as a human, I've had situations in my life where I let that voice sort of dictate, hey, like go on that trip or don't do this or buy that or don't buy that. And rather than just like letting that, slow down, take a breath. Yes, it's okay to assess things good and bad, but sometimes just like go for it. Don't be afraid to take the risks. Don't be afraid to pursue what you want. So it's been an ongoing battle, truthfully, but having coaches and just having like a network of people I can trust and just be open with, even people like you, Kelly, has been, for me, it's the relief and like it helps quiet that voice, if you will. So that helps. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I love it. There's a lot in there. So one, just for clarification, you mentioned a mental health professional as well as executive coach. Two different people?
Two very different people.
Okay. Okay. So one's looking at your career stuff and career situations. One's just sort of coaching you through life and working through all this.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So tell me what you think, because if we think about our audience who, is potentially directors, senior directors, future, heads of marketing, future CMOs, how does imposter syndrome go away or diminish the more experience or successes you've had? Like at some point, does it say like can your proof be in the pudding that you don't need to listen to it anymore?
I used to think it goes away as you advance, just like I used to think it was like a sign of weakness that I needed to ask for help or seek help, even though I never thought I needed like mental health advice or guidance. I am forever grateful of like seeking that and not bringing that into my relationships or into professional relationships, which I made the mistake of before and kind of putting myself in like awkward scenarios. The truth is, it never goes away. At least for me, I've never seen it. If anything, it just gets different. So said another way, as I've advanced in my career, it's not necessarily that I doubt my capabilities as much. It's more of getting comfortable in scenarios I'm less used to. As before, some of those scenarios might be things like, oh, I have to have a difficult conversation or address workplace conflict. Not sure I really want to do that, right? And like I'd work with a coach and like how to best handle that or how do we best tackle those scenarios. In the case of like joining PathFactory or joining Alice or joining Haiku with you, those scenarios might be more of like, hey, do I understand this industry? Do I understand that buyer? Like, do I really want to do this? Should I become a consultant or should I do a full-time job? Should I only hold out? I think you and I talked about this. Like, should I only hold out for CMO jobs or should I pursue? So I definitely think for me, it's never gone away. It's definitely adjusted based on the scenarios. I have found that with the right strategies for coping with it, I've been able to better manage it, which for me, as long as I can manage it, and I've never viewed my inner voice as like a bad thing. It's always kind of been my self-coach in a sense, but I have found that it can sabotage my success if I let it, because it can be that negative. It can come off as being very negative for me, as opposed to like, hey, great job, Pete. Like, keep doing it, keep going. Like for me, when that inner voice is there, it tends to have a negative construct. So I have always tried to find ways, especially in my last couple of years, to quiet it, as opposed to it's like that voice that's, hey, keep going, doing great. So no, it's never gone away. Definitely adjusted, but I'm also grateful for it. Like I feel like this is the thing that I've observed is when I'm challenging myself and pushing myself out of my comfort zone, the voice is louder, which for me is kind of like also an encouraging sign because it means I'm growing or I'm challenging myself in new ways. When it's not there, I've kind of observed that I'm probably getting too complacent too. So as weird as it sounds, I sort of now invite it.
Keeps you on your toes.
Whereas before I like ran from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. Well, it's an interesting mix for you, or for a lot of people, which I'm sure is pretty common, is introverted means you process inside somewhat. We talked about sharing at work and being vulnerable at work, or personal, whatever, but being vulnerable. So that's sort of like saying, okay, I'm going to process out loud right here, but I'm normal normally processing internal. Then you've got this sort of imposter syndrome feeling of like, am I good enough? Do I know this market? Do I want to do this? And second guessing decisions. Like that's a lot of activity going on in your head at any one time. And then you've got this idea that, you want to grow in your career. You've got a data-driven mindset. Like all of these things it's hard. Like being a leader is hard work. And it may not it's not just hard because it's crazy amount of meetings and all that good stuff, but it's also my hardest thing is carving out time to think and actually put that strategy in place and believe in it. And then not just be sort of something that comes out of a meeting, but something that actually took a couple hours and put pen to paper on and be able to find that time while processing, while questioning if I know what I'm doing, while, all the things happen. So leadership is tough. Like there's more that you're buying into versus just managing a larger team.
And if Kelly, you know this about me, people listening may not. Like one of the things I've always tried to pride myself in is I wanted to be vulnerable with others because I wanted the people around me or the team I was managing to feel that same comfort. But it's a very fine line, as I've learned the hard way. There's going to be individuals who love that and appreciate it and admire that. And those teams and I have gelled and have excelled. And candidly, some of my closest friends to this day are relationships that kind of built off that style, if you will. There's been other relationships where I've had to adjust that for whatever reason. They don't find that as professional or as comfortable, or, there is that line between professional and personal. And Kelly, as you know, at times I probably am, at least I'm mindful that I have to be respectful of that. But because I tend to just be so open and direct, like I encourage that type of dialogue, and it's not always most well received in some cases. So it's having that self-awareness as well, which is where like a coach or a boss like you or mentors for me has been critical, because I've had to learn. Probably one of the things I've learned the hard way, and when we talk about leadership, is I wasn't ready to be a leader at first, and there was no training, there was no coaching. I read books, but it's like trial by fire until you go through it, until you learn that there's different styles and skill sets, and this probably isn't going to come out right. But even as a male, the way I manage males or females also has to be adjusted. And that's all been trial by fire and learning and adjusting. And coaches and people like yourself and mentors, and without those resources, I would probably be lost today.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. For me, and one, you realize the more you go up in your career, the less safe internal network there is, because you can't vent to your team because you have to be the leader on the team. And so who you vent to, I have a group from Rackspace, a group of ladies that we just connected while we were there. We were all we were all leaders, but of different functions. We had an HR leader and a finance leader and a support leader and whatever. And we just all connected. And it was a safe place to vent because we didn't work on the same teams. We didn't work for each other. And it was great. We still, I left Rackspace 5 years ago, and it's still the group that I go to. And then I just created one at Demandbase, and they're 5 women, all senior, all in their, similar age group. I won't give that a number, but we're all kind of we've all been adults for a while. We're all managing, teenagers. We're all managing large teams at the office. And it just becomes this sort of safe place to go because your team can't be it, And so I think that's cool. So speaking of those kind of communities, one of the things that you also pride yourself on or that you've kind of been intentional about, is building a network of other marketing leaders, CMOs specifically, finding those communities, finding people that you trust and lean on. How have you done that?
Yeah. So truthfully, it started off through old bosses, I'd say predominantly. So I've been fortunate that I've had some former bosses like yourself or Ken or MK. And truthfully, whether they fully recognized it at that time or not, they sort of introduced me to the value of mentors or advisors outside of your day-to-day boss. This day, I know I could text you about probably anything and you'll listen, which I'm forever grateful for. And it took me a while to see that value, truthfully, because I tend to internalize and I have a MOPS kind of mindset and I'm naturally quiet, I was always one of those people that would try to solve it myself. Even in like my personal relationships with my spouse, like that was the same challenge. Was instead of like communicating and talking, it was always like I'll internalize. I'll go into my room, and to your point around having like time to think, I would like seek out that time to be by myself and think and process, but almost to the detriment of relationships. So I intentionally got really specific about building that. And the way I try to do it was I first focused on LinkedIn, I'd say, to start. So the best example I'd use is, and you know this individual because I introduced you to, but like Gaetano was a peer of mine, Gaetano Donati, if people listen to this, he's a well-known VP of growth marketing. Him and I were sort of like at peer level at the time. And I admired his work from a distance, but didn't really know him, had no relationship. I would see him post things on LinkedIn. I'm like, this guy is someone I need to like talk to, get to know, and just like bounce ideas off of. And I was following him for probably a year, Kelly, and like never talked to this person. I was like, probably doesn't even know who I am. Wouldn't comment on his posts. I might like something, but that's it. And I was definitely one of those like quiet lurkers on social media. Probably to some degree still am. And long story short, I remember Gaetano had an unfortunate situation occur in his life. I sent him like, I want to say like a coffee gift card or something. And I said in the note, like, hey, if you ever just need someone to listen, like I'm happy to do that for you. And as you know, Kelly, to this day, like we are very close friends because of that. Like that was what sparked the conversation for us. And, you know, come to find out, he was obviously very appreciative of that. And I wasn't trying to do that as like a hook or some marketing ploy or sales ploy to get him. As somebody who I admired from a distance, was following his stuff for a while. I saw him share something that was vulnerable to him. I've obviously been through that. I think we all have at some point in our life. And I just wanted to be a resource because he was helpful to me. And that has led to a huge relationship. So I would say LinkedIn was the starting place, and examples like that, which is finding people like yourself, Kelly, or others who I liked or admired. And I got comfortable reaching out to them. And I'll admit, for a long time, that was really uncomfortable. But I found that just asking people for like 30 minutes, 9 out of 10 times, people agree. Even I may not always get back to you because DMs in LinkedIn are a disaster. But at some point, I go through them, and I have tried to never say no. And truthfully, to this day, whether it's Gaetano or Charlie, Riley, or others, I have friends from LinkedIn that I have never, some degree, even people I've never still met physically outside of situations like this, Kelly, over Zoom or digital, but like we're friends and we bounce ideas and we connect. And so LinkedIn was one. And then communities. So the way I was identifying marketing communities was I would just see peers or CMOs, what they were in. So either on their LinkedIn profiles or communities that they would talk about. And I started to narrow them down to like 3 to 5, and then I joined them all. Some were paid, the majority were free. And my goal was like, I'll give each of these 90 days. If I see value in it, I'll like keep it. If I don't see value in it, I'll purge it out. Because I knew, like, I'm sure like everyone, yourself, Kelly, you're like in 20 Slack channels, and you can, just your company one alone, you could barely manage them all. Yeah. So that was the way I managed it, was I would just monitor what people were talking about. And then I narrowed them down. And it was trial by fire again. At first, that strategy did not work. And it didn't work not because there wasn't value in the communities, but I didn't get the value in terms of networking or relationships I was looking to get out of it. Like, there was helpful information being shared, but I didn't feel like I was building relationships. So I had to force myself to, what I started to do was find the people who were most active in the communities, and I just started reaching out to them. And again, forcing myself to get comfortable, because my logic was like, if Kelly's super active in this community, odds are she'll make 30 minutes, especially if I'm a community member, right? And the way I would do is like find something to just post about, or like Kelly's talking about how to be a better leader. Cool, like I want to be a better leader, so I'll use that as my hook in. And I've just naturally been able to develop relationships through that. And that's how I've tried to become a better community kind of member. Am I good at like great at it? Hell no. There are people way better. Like everyone on this, I get busy, and there's communities I probably haven't even looked at in months at this point. But a lot of my network today was a combination of LinkedIn and communities, and being very intentional about the two. And I'd say, if I were to summarize, for me, it started off by identifying peers, so people in roles like mine, and having a short list of like 5 to 10 people that I knew I wanted to get close with, like Gaetano, and reaching out to them. Then like the next level of that evolution was CMOs like you, Kelly, who I either admired or knew I'd like to try to like build a relationship with. And then it was rinse and repeating that model. And am I perfect at that level yet? No, I probably need to add more CMO level leaders like yourself to that. But fortunately, I've got a good little bucket of a few, and they're like my sounding board today. Even PathFactory, if Helen's listening to this, Helen, who used to be the CEO and CMO of PathFactory, was someone I just had met through conferences and stuff. We've always stayed in touch, and a lot of the opportunity I have now was through her. Like, she saw a message I posted and she introduced me to CEO, and here we are, right? And that's pure network driven. That wasn't me like applying to jobs and stuff like that. That was the value of network. So if that helps, that's sort of how I've intentionally approached it. And it's my career in large parts the result of even you and I, Kelly, right? Was a former boss of mine who introduced me to you. We had many conversations. You put up with me over many conversations, and here we are. So yeah, my network has been invaluable to my career up to this point.
Yeah, I love that. I think those are super tactical approaches like that people can try in terms of how to use LinkedIn more efficiently or more effectively than just sort of scrolling through, following people, but actually taking some initiative, reaching out, asking for advice, all that good stuff. So I think that's awesome. And I think that that community passes on, right? I mean, you got people you're reaching out to people, and then people, are then reaching out to you to get advice. And that is a nice pay up for your own.
And if I could just add, and Kelly, you saw this. So after you left Haiku and I unfortunately got laid off unexpectedly, although I probably could have seen that one coming. No hard feelings, by the way. It probably took like 2 or 3 weeks, if you remember, or I think we chatted a few times and I was like, okay, like I need to take a break and figure out what I want to do. And then I just had the courage and I posted on LinkedIn. And again, if you had asked me 2 or 3 years ago the value of network or community, I would probably not have been a believer, truthfully. Like, I would see people post on LinkedIn, and my thing was always like, how can you be good at your job if you have time to always be posting here or talking or commenting? Like, I never understood it, truthfully. And I posted on LinkedIn that I had unfortunately got laid off, and I was like, if I get 20 likes, I'd be happy. And truthfully, that thing erupted in ways to this day I still don't. I'm forever grateful, but like would never foreseen that. And to see the response and people who I maybe talked to once, or CMOs or marketing peers or leaders who may have followed me that I didn't even know really, or had never really had the courage to reach out to, all reaching out, like offering, making introductions. There is power in network that you don't fully realize. And there's people following you that you don't fully realize. All I can state is do not underestimate the value of the people you work with, the people you formerly worked with, people that you might have met once at a conference or a trade show. Take pride in that. Try to seek out opportunities to further develop those relationships. Don't be afraid to reach out to people you might have worked with 5 years ago, even if it's just to check in. I saw the value of that firsthand. And truthfully, I wasn't unemployed for very long, but in large part because the power of communities, LinkedIn, and network. And like I said, I would have never seen that or predicted that a couple of years ago, ever.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I think that's awesome. I think about that goes back to like posting like that stuff. Like, it's a vulnerability thing, right? Like, you kind of waited a few weeks and said, I'm just going to do this. I've always wondered that too. Like, whatever post that I'm looking, I post that I'm not, like, how do I feel? Like, I'm supposed to be the like big bad boss. I'm supposed to be the one who knows what's going on. Like, would I show that like I'm looking for a role? Like, it's a mind mess a little bit of kind of like, where do
I debated it. Oh, I think we texted about this. Like, I was like, should I do this?
Yeah.
Like, am I good at my job if I got laid off? Am I good at my job if I've ever been fired? Or like, am I over vulnerable or oversharing? And so many people have been in those shoes, whether you fully realize or not. Even when you look up like celebrities, like an Oprah, et cetera, like they're well-known people who were fired or laid off who became the top of the top in their career paths. And you just don't recognize it always. Like, it's easy to forget the failures. But putting myself out there and realizing how strong my network or community is, even when that imposter syndrome was telling me like, oh, I don't really have that many friends, or I lost my job, I'm in trouble. Like, what am I going to go do? And truthfully, quieting that and just having the confidence to put yourself out there, I would never hesitate to do it again. And if anyone's listening to this, even if you get 10 likes, you don't know who those 10 likes are or the 100 other people that might have seen it. Because it's not just the people that are engaging, it's the full impression and visibility share of that. And just that one post had like 200,000 impressions. I mean, Kelly, I was mind boggled by that. And to this day, I still get messages and it's fascinating. So anyways, like I can't understate the value of community, putting time and effort into it. And frankly, there are people way better at it than me, but just dedicating some time, even if it's an hour a week, to reach out to someone, have a coffee, have a virtual chat, get in the community, just reach out to somebody. You never know what that's going to lead to. So.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. That's awesome. One question, totally tactical, yes or no, spitfire question. Do you accept every connection request on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I always wonder, like, should I? I'm like, well, as long as we have at least like 50 people in common, then I'll say yes. Or if you're something to do with marketing, I'll say yes. If you're like, I'm always like, what are the filters I should run this through?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a few where you'll get like instantly sold like life insurance or franchisees or stuff like that. But even then, I've always looked at it as you never know who somebody knows. And I always had this mindset from my father. So as you know, Kelly, like I grew up, my father owned restaurants. And for a long time, I used to get mad at my father when we closed the kitchen. So we closed the kitchen at 9 p.m. And then we'd always like, I swear to you, especially on the weekends, somebody would always walk in at like 9:05.
Yeah.
When we've already shut down the broiler or the pizza ovens or whatever. And my father would always make us turn everything back on. And his logic was, you never know where that person came from. Let's imagine they drove from Florida and obviously we were in Massachusetts. He goes like, this could be the meal of their life or what they traveled here for. And you don't know that. So we will never turn anyone down. And for a long time when I was a kid, I was like, Dad, what the hell? I just want to get home, right?
Yeah.
And I've always tried to maintain that mindset because it's those little things that you don't think are big, but you never know who that person knows, or you never know what that person, like my father would tell me, for all you know, that person's family just passed and they're here for for a funeral, or maybe they're celebrating anniversary or wedding. Like, who are we to turn people down? And I kind of look at, you never know. Yeah, they might have interior motives, but I'm never going to reject somebody because the truth is I don't want to be on the receiving end of rejection. Kelly, you know, I hate rejection.
Yeah.
Probably why I'm not in sales, but
we all do. It's the worst for sure.
Yeah. If I'm trying to reach out to you, Kelly, to get coffee or to get to know you, I want somebody to be open-minded and give me a chance to say, and for that matter, I'll be the same with everyone that way too. So no, I do not turn people down.
I love it. Very cool. All right. We should wrap up because we could talk about this all day. But before we go, one fun fact about you, anything that people don't know that you would like to share?
So I peaked earlier in life. So my siblings and I were all child models.
Oh.
For, I think it was Sears and Oshkosh or JCPenney. Probably have to ask my mom.
I didn't know this. This isn't just a surprise for our guests. That's a surprise for me too. So one thing I'd love to ask is, can we get a picture of that for the show notes? I'd like to drop that in.
I can get you a picture, yeah.
I would like to see that. That's amazing.
I mean, it was back in like the early 90s, so the picture quality is not the best, but yes.
Very cool. That's awesome. You said you...
Showing my age. I have 5 brothers and sisters.
And were you all models?
I think the majority of us were.
Yeah.
Because we're all, I think you know, Kelly, like I have an older sister, but then the rest of us after me are all Irish twins.
Mm-hmm.
And the youngest 2 are twins. So I almost want to say we all were, at least after me.
Yeah. At least all the below.
The younger ones.
Wow. That's amazing. That's the most fun thing I've heard this month. I don't know. That's awesome. I can't wait to see the picture. Very cool. All right. So if people wanted to, I mean, obviously you've talked about LinkedIn. So if people want to learn more about you, I'm assuming they find you on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's probably the best. It's probably the one social platform I stay consistent with.
Yeah.
But yeah, just reach out. I'm happy to talk, happy to help. Happy to have these types of conversations. Awesome. Would love to.
Very cool. So Peter Lorenco, PathFactory, head of marketing. Follow him, find him, maybe reach out for a coffee. Sounds like you might want to do it. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. And Pete, thanks so much for being here.